So what did you say your name was again?
Hi, my name's Josh Pyke from Sydney. I'm a Sydney singer-songwriter, just starting out in this crazy industry. What about you? What's your name?
My name is Kavian Temperley, and I'm from Fremantle, Western Australia.
That's funny. I always thought your name was Kevin Temperley. That's so weird, but it's Cavian. I've been calling you Kev for
Kev,
years.
Kev is the other immensely talented guy from Fremantle.
Oh, that's weird. I've always called him Bob.
Oh no, that's another intensely talented guy, but he's now from Melbourne somewhere.
Kev. So there's Kevin Parker, Cavian Temperley, and then Bob Evans, who's actually Kevin Mitchell.
AKA Kevin Mitchell, yeah.
And then you're in a band called Eskimo Joe. So that's very confusing. Why don't you guys just call yourselves like different names?
Well, because I mean, look, I've been pushing for it for years that it should be, just Kav Temperley and the other guys. Uh, so they're never really into that one for some strange reason. And your band's called Josh Pyke.
Yeah, I kept it simple just because find it really difficult to remember most things. And so I was like, I already knew my own name. So I was like, I'm just going to call my band project Josh Pyke. And it's been great. It's kind of like Bon Jovi.
Right, excellent. And we are of course joshing each other
Very good.
because we know each other very well. In fact, I just stayed in your house and slept in your bed.
Yes.
Thankfully, you and your wife weren't there at the same time.
Well, I mean, that's another story. But yes, you and your wonderful family were staying in my wonderful family's home while my wonderful family and I were in Korea doing a bit of a eating and traveling trip.
Amazing. And did you eat delicious food?
Oh my God. It's like, yeah, you can throw a dart and literally hit like we had a list of restaurants that we wanted to go to that we'd read about on like Dan Hong's, Instagram and everything. And I think we went to one that was on the list, and the rest of the time we were just finding places, everywhere, hole in the wall places, or just like you'd look around and you'd just see a place where locals looked like they were lining up to get into, and we'd go there, and it was just, it was the best. So good.
I did this crazy gig the other day where I got invited on stage by AB Original to sing their song Jan 26.
Oh, wow.
I did have a thought of like maybe I need to get out of this rock and roll game and get into hip hop because it was massive. It was like an entertainment center. And anyway, it was really fun. And afterwards, I was talking to the guys in the band, and Briggs was like, he went to Korea and did this kind of culinary tour where people take you around to these great places, and he said it was really stressful because they let him into this like amazing restaurant eating this Korean food, and then the owner was just like, "Oh well, I'm gonna jet off. Can you guys just like close the door when you're done?" And he was like, "This is stressful, man."
You know what I found stressful is and really humbling, and we tried to like learn some phrases before we went to Korea, and it's a really difficult language. Like there's not even just sort of like there's no recognizable words for me. Like as a guy that studied a little bit of French and German in high school and stuff like that, you can kind of get by because you can recognize
pretty different languages, but
well, but they're based on, Germanic and Roman, you know what I mean? Like there's some things you can recognize. Whereas Korea, it's just like even, gamsamnida is how you say thank you, but it's like it took me a long time to remember that. And then there's Silia Hamnida, which is like excuse me, and then there's like that's it. I've forgotten all the other ones. I've only been back in Sydney for like 6 hours and I've forgotten it all.
Well, well done about getting on a Zoom interview with me. I don't know what I'm doing too, but now I've got a music-related question. How, like, I was obviously saying your house was filled with like heaps of instruments, and there was a whole recording rig out the back, which I was like fighting in my mind every day not to kind of like wander out there and start to muck around with. Do you find you have to like if you're on family holidays, you have to discipline yourself not to like disappear into your own brain and play music? Do you play like zero music when you're on the road, or do you just kind of,
Well, I didn't take any instruments, but what I do find traveling of any type really great for is coming up with lyric ideas and just general concepts that I want to explore or write about. So like, and I always find this with galleries, like we went to this awesome gallery in, it was in Seoul. I can't remember the name of it, but it was kind of more a modern art gallery. one part of it was modern art, and then the other part of it was art from the Joseon dynasty, which was like the longest running dynasty in Korea. That before it got like, you know, ended by various wars and, you know, Japanese occupation and all this kind of stuff. And so like walking through galleries and being in another culture and kind of trying to, you know, understand their culture and their timeline and all that kind of stuff. And then even just like sort of thinking about the actual space that I was in, because it was a beautiful venue. All of that kind of stuff makes me think of lyrics and makes me think of all these concepts that I want to explore. And so I write it down. I've got, you know, like a huge amount of notes that I've written in my phone. So whilst I don't sort of disappear with an instrument and spend time away, I definitely disappear into my own head and perhaps up my own ass for a few hours at a time in the gallery, thinking about stuff. But that's what I find traveling is always great for. It's kind of like, as a creative, I'm sure you would agree with this. It's like you kind of need those experiences to refill your creative gas tank that then you can, you know, empty it again into whatever the next project is that you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, like, when I'm on tour with the band, I try and get away. I don't try and spend much time in my hotel room. I'll try and go to galleries or just walk. But I do find it harder when I'm doing the Eskimo Joe thing because it's such a like machine. You know, you check into the hotel, then you go to the venue, and then you do the sound check, and then you got half an hour, do your hair, and then you're back at the venue, and then you're doing the gig, and then you're going to sleep, and it doesn't. Everything just seems to be very kind of, you know, ordered,
Regimented.
and I guess that's why, you know, people get that kind of post tour blues because I don't know about you, but I kind of when I get back from being on the road, I suddenly start to pace the floor like a cat at about 6 o'clock, thinking that there's something I'm meant to be doing right now. And I do find that that is not great for creativity. I find that there is has to be like an element of space in what you do, and yes, you know, traveling is really good for bringing in these ideas, especially if you're not in this like regimented regime. But I find I need to get back home to actually get these ideas and put them together into that one singular idea, which is the song.
Yeah. It's similar. It's like you kind of. I personally can't sort of make lightning strike, but you can kind of be in a headspace to allow it, you know, to receive the lightning. And yeah, like the inspiration when you're traveling, I actually do a lot of writing on the road, but I think it's different because I'm a solo artist. Particularly on the solo tours, I have heaps of downtime by myself, and it's like I try and get out of the hotel room and do all that kind of stuff. But inevitably, there's going to be time where I'm by myself, and I'd rather try and, you know, tinker away at a song than like just watch TV. But let me ask you something, if I may.
Oh,
So I've been following you on Instagram just recently. I just started following you. No, that's not true. But so these Esky shows that you've been doing, they look like they've been pretty amazing. I know we're here to talk about your solo tour and your solo album, but tell me about the. Let's just segue into that by talking about the Eskies tour.
well, pretty magical because getting to play these, you know, iconic venues like in more theaters and your forum, you know, all those kind of size, big classic theater rooms that when you were a young artist, you know, that was like the benchmark of, you know, one day I'll get to play my own show there. So we've since played them a bunch of times. To go back and play these theaters again and play albums in their entirety is so satisfying because, especially with Eskimo Joe, like as we became bigger as a band, all of the hits became more high octane. And so if you're doing greatest hit shows, it's just like all the time. Whereas albums, you know, they're a considered beast. They have a beginning, middle, and end. And so to sing them, so much easier and so much more enjoyable for me. But also, yeah, to get out and you know play to a whole bunch of fans who love these records there and know what the next song is going to be. It just feels I could keep doing it for a very long time. Unfortunately, Australia is a bit small for that. So we got one last show this weekend, and it's going to be a bit sad. But we are filming it and recording it. So
That's a home. That's your home show, right? That's the Frio Art Centre. Song as a City was that McKercher that did that one with you guys?
a little bit, yeah. We hoarded around a little bit. We started demoing the album after we were on Modular Records. Have was kind of a character. We went in. Avalanches had put their record out, and they were getting heaps of attention, and we were just like basically selling our record off the back of out of the back of the tour van, basically. And so we kind of stupidly, naively went in and said, "Hey, you should let us off our contract because you're not doing any work." And he was like, "Well, that's not how it works, and now you're fucked, and we're going to hold on to your contract forever." But we actually started writing a song this year and demoing it for over a really long time, not knowing if we're ever going to be able to put it out. And then we managed to meet Harity, who ended up becoming our manager, but she was the one who, instigated getting our contract off Modular and Festival Mushroom. And in that time, we'd had we wrote 2 albums. We got to condense down, and then we went in with Paul McKercher and recorded at some really beautiful Sydney studios that don't exist anymore, like the Milk Bar, which did all our drums, and that was an amazing studio. We've still got all the drum samples from that, and it was all recorded to tape at that point in time. So it just sounded cool, and McKercher's like it's a Don at recording, which you have recorded with him as well. Were you at the Milk Bar with McKercher with your first record as well?
No, we weren't. We weren't at the Milk Bar. Was that Phil Punch? Was that the Milk Bar?
Yeah.
But the reason I mentioned it is because I was still working at a record store at that time, and I really loved that record, and I remember reading that it was McKercher had done a lot of it, and then that was inspired me to get in touch with him to do some stuff with me. So in some small way, I'm saying I owe it all to you.
I wasn't going to be the first to say it. But I think that the thing that pulled that record together, because we were trying to, put everything in the kitchen sink in there, because we took the tapes home, we just got a Pro Tools set up, we then recorded fucking everything we possibly could on top of it. There was a million melodies all going at the same time on every single song. And then we were lucky enough to get Nick Warnay to mix it, who has done, a million amazing records. And he did a lot of production, mixing, so he would bring in a riff, and as opposed to all these melodies and riffs playing at the same time, he'd bring one in and take it out, bring another one in, take it out, and so he really kind of pulled that whole album together and made it sound good.
Okay, great. Well, and now segueing from the Eskimo Joe juggernaut into the Kav Temperley multiverse, which is your solo thing. So you've already done one solo album and an EP, is that correct?
Yes, an EP and an album, and now I'm about to release album number 2.
And tell us, Kav Temperley, going from being in a big band, as you mentioned, it's a machine, it's a bit of a juggernaut. What's it like going from that environment to then being a solo artist? Of course, I know because I am a solo artist, one of Australia's most beloved solo artists.
Doors. I remember you saying to me when I was first going to put out some solo stuff, you'd be like, "Oh, you'll love it. It's the best."
Was I right or was I right?
Well, it's actually really fucking hard, is what you didn't tell me, because you didn't have anybody else to kind of, hey, can you play the drums on this? Or, hey, what do you think about, can you write a keyboard part over this?
Oh, yeah, that bit's tough. Yeah.
You end up having to do a lot of work. I think making my first solo album was, I worked with a couple of different people, like John Castle, who you've worked with as well. And that was great because it helped me kind of fill in the gaps of who the fuck am I as a solo artist. But doing this second solo album, I, by necessity, did pretty much all of it in this studio here because we were in lockdown and I couldn't even be in the room with anyone else. So I just had to kind of upskill and do everything myself, basically, apart from play the drums. And I didn't mix it, but it was a huge learning curve. And in music, it's one of those things you think you know it all, and then you're like, fuck, I know nothing. I've got lots of stuff to learn. What about you with your solo stuff? Did you record any of it in your studio space? We are viewing as we speak.
Yeah, I did the last 2 albums pretty much entirely here. What you can mostly see in this footage is the pool table and an elliptical machine. Leisure and fitness is also an important part of being a musician. But in this corner, this way, there's a drum kit and a piano, and then I've got all my guitars and everything. So yeah, I did pretty much everything here, and then similarly, I can sort of play crappy drums. So I played some crappy drums on a couple of the tracks. But then for the rest of the time, again, same thing. In lockdown, I'd send the files off to my dear friend Josh Schubert, who played in my live band for the first couple of years of touring, and he lives in the Blue Mountains and has a studio there. So I'd send them up to him, and he'd, I trust him implicitly. So he'd do the drums there, but then I'd have I did all the strings here and the horns, upright piano, and obviously all the vocals and guitars and everything. So, but then I probably similar to yourself, I find that after you've done something so after you've been so hands-on with everything, it's you need that extra perspective. So I like to get somebody else to mix it. Also, I'm not a skilled enough. I do some mixing, but I'm not a skilled enough mixer to.
I like to pretend I can mix, but for me, it's like a dark art. And when people do it, I'm blown away. I'm like, how did you do that?
Yeah. There's definitely a bit of that. So I got my dear old. Well, so to find happiness, I got Wayne Connolly to mix it.
Yep.
Who is a total legend and did my first couple of records. And so we went up to Byron with in a brief respite from lockdown last March. We went up to the music farm in Byron, and I took the whole family up, and we spent almost 3 weeks up there mixing the record. And I found it to be such a great kind of closure to the record, because it was somebody else listening to it and making suggestions, and it just there was enough time in between that. There was probably 3 months from laying down the last bit of recording until mixing, so I had a little bit of objectivity from it as well. But yeah, and I reckon that whole process made it kind of my favorite record, because I wasn't even expecting to make another record at the time. I just kind of did it.
And do you, even though you kind of have a sound that you've developed as a solo artist over a period of time, do you still kind of wake up in the morning and go, I've got a grand idea of my next album, I'm going to farm it out to a bunch of hip hop producers and I'm going to do this? Do you have or I'm going to get someone to arrange a string section and it's just going to be vocals and strings? Do you have do you ever have grand ideas in the morning of, what you want to do next?
I sort of do. I realized there's for my whole career, people have been saying this album, you need to kind of reinvent yourself and do all this. And I've always pushed against that, because my favorite artists, they evolve and they develop, but they don't necessarily reinvent them. Sufjan Stevens is really experimental and does lots of crazy shit, but you can always tell it's a Sufjan Stevens record. And I kind of want to be more like that. So I don't feel the need to kind of reinvent my whole sound. But even on this album, there's a 10-minute orchestral section at the end of one of the songs, which, is the first time I've done that kind of thing. So I like it. I feel like, excuse me, I feel like every album of mine has been different and quite unique from the last. But it's, as you say, when you've kind of developed a sound, especially vocally, I pretty much always sound like me, I can't really change that. And so I feel like people haven't often realized that the production and sort of the creative process that's gone behind each of my albums has been quite different from the last.
They don't realize the genius behind the idea.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Genius behind the ideas.
Hey, your words, not mine. Your words.
How often do you have other people tracking your vocals?
Tracking my vocals? Oh, pretty often. Yeah. All the main stuff I'll do at home, but then if there's, and I have a really good chain here. I've got an old vintage U67 from the 1960s that I bought in LA. In 2009.
I covered it every time I go to your house.
Yeah, it's a beautiful microphone, and then that goes through my Quad 8 Pre's, which came out of a desk that Billy Fields, legendary Australian producer and artist, had at his studio, which was called Paradise Studios, and I got them in 2007 and got them racked up by.
I remember because we used them on the Basement Birds record as well.
Yeah, we did. That's right. Yeah. And then that's through a distressor, which is your classic vocal compressor or just compressor in general. So it's a really great vocal chain. It's pretty much it's a pretty much unbeatable vocal chain. So yeah, I'm pretty, and also like the way I sing, I like fucking around with harmonies and stuff, and I just find being under the pump or on a time crunch makes that more difficult to do. So I really enjoy recording my own vocals. But having said that, like yeah, Wayne and John Castles recorded loads of my vocals. Paul McKercher, um, you know, old mate Andy from Perth for the Basement Bird stuff. So yeah, no, loads of people have recorded my vocals, and all of them have enjoyed it.
All of them. Good feedback.
And I've had great feedback from all of them. So
right. Yeah, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with recording my own vocals. Like,
can I point something out about your vocals? Because I remember when we were doing the Basement Birds record, the freakiest thing about your recorded vocals is that you have some kind of second. You're like a throat singer, like a Buddhist throat singer. Yeah. But you have. I remember like we were singing our songs, and there's like a second frequency in your voice that harmonizes with the main thing. It's really bizarre. And it's cool. It's obviously what gives you your unique sound. But I was like, wow, there's an actual ghost. Like he's possessed. He's possessed by the ghost of another singer in his own voice.
I don't know about everyone else, but I always feel like a hack, in my singing and especially like, doing the Basement Birds stuff. Like everyone, such fantastic singers. Even people like Kev, who'd been given shit in his early days of Jeb. He's a great singer and can sing in tune, beautiful timbre and all the rest of it. But I don't know if it's like just kind of what drives us all to go on. But I'm always in this kind of this thing of like I need to prove that I'm like a real musician, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah,
I've
for sure.
fucking recorded a record where I've literally done everything, and I'm just like, oh, one day I'll be a real musician. You know what I mean? And especially with singing, I always look at other singers, and I always look up to how well they sing and all the rest of it. And I don't know if you can ever analyze that about yourself.
Isn't it funny? Like that whole thing, oh, one day I'll be a real musician. Like I think that all the time. Like, because I mean, the same thing. Like I've recorded countless pieces of music in this studio and played, like, I do music for film and TV and stuff. And I just I did a whole TV series called Mickey versus the World for ABC. And I had to write 8 songs covering topic, like writing all the lyrics, but playing all the instruments, producing everything, covering all topics from like consent to gender and all this kind of stuff, right? I had to do hip hop tracks, a big musical number, and I played all the drums and like played, did all the string lines and played real piano and all this. But I would still if I walk into like a room full of real musicians, I'm still like, oh shit, I'm the worst guy here. Like I can't, because I can't read music and stuff like that. So I'd be like, well, there's nothing much I can offer here at all. And it's like, I've been doing this for 20 years and I still feel like I've still got massive imposter syndrome.
That was actually one of the things that came out of the whole lockdown experience, that I actually was like, well, what do I want to do next? And I feel like as creatives, we're always coming up with a new harebrained scheme, because our strength is not being able to play the instruments. It's actually being able to come up with ideas out of thin air, which is like alchemy, right? And so I'm always thinking, well, what harebrained scheme can I create next? And one of the things that I thought about extending myself was actually orchestrating something, like creating like a musical piece, like a musical or an actual symphony or something, and actually teaching myself to orchestrate it, like do the demoing part of it, like use the computer to help workshop the ideas and everything, but really end up with myself having learned how to write that on the page. And I got really, really, really close to doing it in the next year, and I applied for a residency. I didn't get the residency, and part of me was like, "Ooh, now I don't have to learn how to read music." But yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Like so many of my friends who are successful musicians didn't study music. Did you study music at school? Like,
no, hell no. No, I mean, I wanted to study music at school, and in year 11 or whatever it was, or 10, and when you had to choose your subjects for the HSC, as we called it back in the 90s. I went to a selective school, right? So it was an academic, focused school, because I'm very, very, very smart. And
and private education.
No, it wasn't. It was a public. It was just a selective. I don't know how I got in, to be honest. But anyway, I wanted to do music, and I got a petition together from other students. So we had enough people that wanted to do it. I got a teacher to sign up, to say that they would teach the HSC course, and we took the petition to the principal, and we're like, look, there's people want to do this, and he was like, if you want to do this kind of thing, you should go to another high school. You should go to Newtown Performing Arts School. And I was like, I was in year 11. I'd just almost finished the whole thing, so I didn't even do music for my HSC. And I'm
Yeah, I find that stuff baffling. Like when people, especially teenagers or kids, want to learn, and they go to adults and say, "I want to learn," and the adults are like, "No."
Yeah, I know. I mean, we're not going to.
Your job to find, oh, that's what you're interested in learning. Well, let's create a lesson plan around that.
Yeah, I think it is way more like that now. I mean, in my experience, possibly yours as a parent of kids that are in high school or entering high school like mine are, but it feels better now. But it kind of, it just kind of, that was the nail in the coffin for school for me as well. I was just like, oh, fuck you guys, like I even had the bloody nous to go and get a petition together and everything. And then, what's ironic is they list me on their website as notable alumni.
They have exactly the same experience. I've got like a picture up on the wall at John Curtin Senior High School as like successful graduates. And I literally went to the music department because I was doing the theatre arts program over at John Curtin. And I went to them and said, like, because they would do these musicals every couple of years. And I was a way better musician than any of the kids who were doing special music. But I would go to them, to the head of the music department. And first of all, I wanted to play in the musical. So I was like, hey, I play bass. I don't want to act in the school musical, but I would love to play bass in the band. Is that a possibility? And she gave me this big, her name was Mrs. Parker. She was like, are you in special music? And I was like, no, I'm not. And you can't play in the school band. I was like, okay. And then I went back the next year because I decided that I wanted to try out for the Conservatorium of Jazz. And I was really technical in my bass playing at the time. I was doing all the Jaco Pastorius bass solos. And they had a double bass there and no one played it. And so I said, oh, can I come in at lunchtime? I knocked on her door again. I said, do you mind if I come in at lunchtime and practice on the double bass here? Because I don't have a double bass. I'm studying jazz. And she was like, she had this weird smirk on her face because she knew exactly who I was. And she was like, you in special music? I was like, I'm not in special music. And she was like, well, then you can't use the double bass. And I was like, I looked at her and I literally walked straight out of the school. I went home, like smoked a number, pressed record on my tape recorder and started writing a song, like singing it straight into the tape recorder, like just out of like, I was like,
and that song, ladies and gentlemen, was Sweater.
My mum knocked on the door and she was like, what are you doing home from school? And I said, well, I knew in her brain if I told her that I'd come home to write a song, she'd have to be cool with that. And I was like, I decided to come home and write a song instead. And she was like, okay. And luckily, that's what I do for a living now is smoke weed and press record.
I know. Well, that's it's, I do find it, everybody wants to sort of lay claim to things after they've turned out successful, and that often don't have anything to do with the journey of that success. But hey, speaking of journeys, check out that segue.
Yes.
Speaking of journeys, you are about to head out on the road. Tell us about that.
Well, I've just done an extensive regional tour, not as extensive as the regional tour that you're about to do, which looks very good and has 10 more dates in mind. Yes, this is a longer regional tour. But I'm going to hit the road in February to support the solo album that I'm putting out in October. And then in between that, I'm also dropping some NFTs. Which
what?
Yeah,
an NFT, a non-fungible token.
That's what they call them.
Tell me more about that, Mr. Tech.
Well, I've written. It's called "Love in the Key of A B C D E F G," and I've written a song that I've kind of worked, and they have different lyrics, but they're all the same song in the key of A B C D E F G, but genres change and everything, and then they present like these kind of animated playing cards, And they look. What I love about it is it looks like it's just cool. It's just like a cool piece of art. But there, I worked with the guy who did the artwork for the record, Machines of Love and Grace, and so everything looks like it's kind of like a three-dimensional extension of the album. And I don't know what will happen with them, whether people will buy them, whether it might be the future of how we pay for albums. I don't know, but it is cool. They just look amazing. So
Yeah, they are cool. I think your spin on the NFT thing for music is a cool one of doing, you know, what would you say A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it's
yep.
seven different versions of the same song, and then is it limited to a certain number
Yeah.
per NFT or per version?
Yeah, so there'll be like an exclusive one, which will be a one of one, which will be really expensive. And then it kind of goes, the tiers go down from there. And then there'll be like, a one of five, one of 10, one of 100, and then it gets down to a one of 1,000. And they're, $40 each. So the idea is to bring, the music listening public into the idea of NFTs. I mean, every time there's a new technology that comes out, whether it be crowdfunding or, NFTs or whatever, any way that you can fund music outside of the traditional gatekeepers, I think is really exciting, and we're yet to see one that works really well. But if it does, like, fuck, that would be amazing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I just had to pay out of my own pocket once again to record an artisan quality record, and I think I did a pretty good version of a record for the amount of money that I paid to do it. It still costs a bit of cash. The idea of making that money back from record sales is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Streaming, probably not. From live shows, who fucking knows? Like, so. But you have to do it, otherwise, like, why are people going to come and see you play a show? And I still love putting out records because I love listening. So
Yeah, I think the irony of having, we both have our own studios that we're speaking to each other from, and so everybody assumes, oh, you can just make records for free and whack it up there, but it's like we pay session musicians, we pay mixers, so you're talking, a lot of money just to make the record, even if you do have, the capacity to make it cheaper than it would be if it was in a commercial studio. But the big thing is, you have to promote a record, and promoting a record costs so much fucking money.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of the main thing, and also, like, if you get session players to play on your record, you want to pay everybody correctly and everything. So it's yeah, and the sort of diminishing returns of what streaming pays out is, it's still great for discovery and all that. Like, I love, even just when I was in Korea, like, one of my kids' books that I have written has been released in Korea.
That was going to be my next segue.
Oh, well, it was really cool. So when we were there on holidays anyway. So I reached out to the publisher and, met up with them, had an amazing lunch with them, and went to the bookstore and checked out the book and did some signings and all this kind of stuff. But even that, just having a little bit of activity in Korea, I suddenly had all these new followers, and my streaming went up, right? And you can obviously, like, see where it's coming from. And that's really cool for discovery. And I get a huge kick out of knowing that some Korean kids over there, are checking out my music. But in terms of actually having a sustainable career through streaming, it's not viable for, I would say, 99.9% of the population of musicians. You have to be you really have to diversify your income streams as an artist and a creative these days, which, again, like, neither of us would be complaining about that. It's exciting and fun, and if you're not up for the hustle, then you should find something else to do anyway.
Up for the hustle.
What's that?
I just, like, if you're not up for the hustle.
If you're not up for the hustle, if you don't have the muscle for the hustle, then you should get out of the kitchen, man.
Up the hustle. That's all I've got. And so you're now a celebrated author of children's books.
Yeah.
Is that something you want to continue, or is your passion doing, like, adult fiction eventually?
Great question. I have thought a lot about that, and I love writing kids' books because it really does feel like fighting the good fight. Like, kids just aren't cynical or judgy, or they are judgy, but in a really authentic way. Like, if they're not into something, they don't engage with it; they just walk away. And so I've loved being part of kids books where if kids love it, they just fucking love it, you know, like it's just, they don't care if their mates like it, they don't care what media says about it, or if it's, you know, in the equivalent of getting played on the radio or whatever for books. They just like it, you know, and they come across, and these books, you know, like every year Book Week happens, and I'll see pictures of, you know, kids dressing up as characters from my books for Book Week, and that's just so cool. And then, you know, we both know that like releasing art for, you know, aimed more for adults or contemporaries of ourselves, inherently in that process you're signing up to be judged, you know, and it's really hard. It's mentally difficult, and again, you know, I know that it's just part of the deal. So, you know, you learn to kind of cope with it, but it's not nice. And so I kind of like, I love the idea of writing adult fiction, but I don't know if my mental health could handle the judgment from a whole other sector of the creative industries, you know, the literary field. Because I'm not, you know, like I read a lot, but it's not like I've ever studied writing or you know.
I was listening to Margaret Atwood talk about this, who's one of my favorite writers, and she was saying that you know, it sounded to her it was bizarre that people go to university to study writing, because when she started writing, you just wrote, you know. It wasn't like there was a school for it. And I guess you could say the same thing about rock and roll or songwriting, you know, like we didn't go to school for songwriting, we just had to get it out, and we got better as we, you know, did it more and more.
And Margaret Atwood's a great, obviously I love her writing, but what I've heard about her is that she's almost like she may even actually be dyslexic or something, but she has an editor that understands her, but it's all about story and ideas, right? And the way you communicate these ideas more than the technicality of it in the world of, you know, pop, you know, popular music as opposed to classical music, and, you know, popular fiction as opposed to sort of, I don't know, like academic writing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about ideas and story. And if you can nail those bits, you don't need to go to school to learn that shit.
No, I think if you find your voice, then away you go. You know, yeah. Anyway, I've always fantasized about the idea of actually taking the time to write a novel, just because you have ideas all the time. Like as a creative, you know, storylines of all kinds of entering your head, and you're like, oh yeah, then this could happen and this could happen, and you can't stop that train in your head as it starts to go.
Have you ever tried to do it?
I actually have been I've been chipping away at something, been an idea that's been floating around in my head, and funnily enough, again, you know, it really started to come in massively at the beginning of the whole lockdown period, and like this kind of voice going, you need to write it down, you need to write it down. So just I've been kind of going, kind of, I guess, like just putting the different scenes together in my head, and just on this last Eskimo tour, as opposed to, you know, watching a movie on the plane, I've just found myself writing, and it's great. I don't know what'll come of it, but I've just, and I love writing in the genre that I love, which is this kind of, my favorite is like, I don't know what the word is, but it's like fantasy realism, like, you know, like Haruki Murakami, and, you know, Margaret Atwood is one of them, and even what's his name, who just did Clara and the Sun, you know, English Japanese writer.
Murakami? No.
Yeah.
I've read that.
Yeah. Anyway, I love
that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Didn't he do
Remains of the Day and
Snow Falling on Cedar and?
Maybe that's him. I don't know if he's done that, but no, he did Never Let Me Go, which was.
Oh, Never Let Me Go. I've read that as well. Yeah.
Beautiful.
We should start a book club.
We should keep doing this. We'll record it. We'll send it out into the world.
I've got a. Have you read Rachel Cusk's trilogy of books? Transit. I can't remember the names of the other two, but Rachel Cusk. Boom.
Okay, I'm doing it next. I'm ready to fall in love with a new author.
Oh, she's incredible. Yeah. So, funnily enough, I have completed a novel. Like it's more like a YA kind of dystopian, post-apocalyptic kind of thing, and I've edited it about 4 times, and then I I printed it out, and I have some neighbors who are like 14 and 15, 13 and 15 or something. I was like, this is the perfect age group, and I gave it to them to read, and neither of them liked it, and they just. And so I was like, okay, well, great. Well, there you go. And I spent ages on it. But I don't think, and maybe it's not good. I don't know. That's the other thing. Like, it's hard when you're being successful in another field to like acknowledge that maybe you're just not actually that good at something in another field.
Yeah. Then again, if you played them your first songs that you wrote, they'd probably be like, yes, okay, whatever. You need to write that. You need to get that first idea through. And I think the hard part is that it's so much work. Even making records, I don't know how you feel, but when I get to the 3/4 mark, that 90% mark of making a record, it's this impossible slug of decision making, having to make these decisions. And once those decisions are made, it's final. This song is done and it's out in the world forever, and you can never take it back. And it's this because you think about all your favorite records. So that part is really, really hard. And I always get to that point and go, oh, there's so much work in making records. I think every time. And then I put the album out, and then I wake up next day, I'm like, I'm going to make a hip hop record. You know what I mean? Like, instantly the next day, I'm like, I'm ready to do the next project. So
yeah, I totally agree. That's like Rome came out, and it was like, I'd poured my heart and soul into that record. It was the first record I'd done in 5 years. And then, and then COVID happened, and I couldn't tour it properly. I couldn't promote it properly. And I was pretty it still did really well despite all that. I was really pleased with how it went despite all those challenges. But again, I was like, okay, well, here's another lockdown. Here's another massive, world-changing lockdown. What am I going to do? And I was like, oh, I'm going to record and release another album in lockdown, because what the fuck? Like, what? It's just, I don't know. I've said this to you before, but it's like, there's a difference between wanting to do something and feeling compelled to do something. And I think that's, I call people that are, compelled to do music lifers, like they're in jail forever,
Yeah. And, unfortunately, you and I are both lifers.
Yeah, we're lifers. I know a lifer when I meet a lifer.
Totally. That's right. I'm so sorry. And apparently, we're meant to pivot several times in our career and do other things as well. So maybe, you writing children's books and then maybe into young adult, maybe that's your pivot. Maybe that's the next part. But then clearly, you're not going to be able to stop yourself from making records. So.
No, I love music. That creative outlet. Every time I do it, I'm like, oh, I'm actually good at this. As much as I have the doubt that every creative has, I'm like, this is actually something that I've done. The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of, and even when transitioning from that into doing the sort of composition production stuff that I do for TV and that, leaning back on all the skills that I've learned from being a songwriter and everything. It's like, oh, right, I actually am good at this thing that I've been doing for 20 years. Thank goodness, because
thank God. And so when you hit the road and doing your epic regional tour,
yes,
I have to say, from getting out into the regions again for the first time as a solo artist in like over 5 years, there was really amazing gigs. There was some slightly shit gigs, and there was some gigs in between. But what I loved is this kind of reigniting of your fan base, and you forget that you actually have to go from person to person and be like, remember me, because they all, like, for me, they were all like, oh, did you guys break up in Eskimo Joe? I'm like, no, we're still playing. You're like, oh, this solo thing, I've been doing it. This is my second solo I'm about to do. Like, there is just a lot of people out there. But once you're there and you engage with these people, then suddenly they're like, oh, can't wait for you to come back again. You're like, okay. Are you excited about going out and doing, because I imagine it'll be your biggest, like, consecutive run of shows you've done in a while.
Yeah, 100%. This will be because the thing about touring for me was like for 15 years I was just touring my ass off, and then I took an enforced kind of 2-year break off touring for kind of mental health, just burnout reasons, and then so 2020 was going to be this massive relaunch into it, and then of course we all had another enforced non-self-imposed 2-year break. So this will be like probably the first real full-on tour that I will have done for about 5 years. And I did a band tour to Find Happiness, but that was like 8 shows or something. That's all we could do because of restrictions and everything else. So yeah, this will be way more reminiscent of the sort of touring that I'm more used to, and it feels daunting. But it is, as you say, it's about taking. You can't expect people to just like come to you. You have to go take your music to the people. And it is this weird thing of like people. The attention economy, as everybody talks about, is just so crowded. And so I'll have true, core true fans that I recognize their Instagram handles and stuff, comment on a poster and say, when did you put out a new album? I'm like, what do you mean? I promoted the shit out of this album 3 months ago. So, that is just a function of algorithms and, the way that social media works and stuff. But algorithms don't exist when you're just in a town and you're playing to people, however many people it is. You're cutting through all those algorithms and filters and stuff, and you're just playing. You're having a conversation with people through music.
It's the one thing that they couldn't replicate, no matter how many isolates or whatever they did. That thing about being in a room with a bunch of people and having that experience is like people, I think, forgot and then remembered how much they needed that and how important that is for the whole thing. That'll never be able to be replicated. And one of the other things that I thought was really great about doing the run of shows is getting to that point again where you're like, you've done a whole bunch of shows in a row and you're just like, I just don't think I can do it tonight. Like I can't tell the same stories or, play the same set and, be that guy again. And then you pull your bootstraps on and you get back on stage and then you have like the best show of the tour. And you have a breakthrough moment where you're like, you kind of go to this other place with it. And I found that was the great thing about doing that regionals. Yeah,
it's 100%. It's like, the sort of cliche of like, the payoff is the show, but it's really true. Like, I mean, if you're a lifer, as I said, it's really true. It's like, there have been countless times when I've been absolutely buggered, particularly when my kids were little. You'd be like coming off the back of, no sleep for 3 months with your babies and then leave home and play these shows, where you don't get off stage until 1 a.m. and then get to the hotel at 3 and then get up at 7 to go to the next town. You're just absolutely rooted. But every night, as soon as you hit the stage, the adrenaline kicks in and that real proper connection between you and the audience kicks in. And it's like, it's something that, unless you've done it, it's very hard to explain just how sort of, it's almost like, it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to get all hippy dippy on you, but it is kind of like a spiritual experience.
Yeah, it can be. And before we leave each other because we've been talking for quite a while,
we're just having a chat.
I feel like the good place to leave is, a story that someone else has told you about me that makes you laugh, and I'll do the same to you. I can go first if you like, because I've my favorite story, which I've told you before, but I just want to tell it again.
Okay, tell me yours. I'll try and think of one.
So when I was in London, I was playing a solo little side show when we were doing these shows there. And we played in this cool little place, and I saw it was kind of like a little basement-y kind of sheltered, really cool little club. And I saw a Josh Pyke poster there, and I mentioned that to the English people who were there, and they were like, "Oh my God, do you know him?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, when ages ago we were like really wanting to. We went to the toilets and we were going to do a line of cocaine, and we couldn't find anything to do a line off, so we pulled this poster off the wall, the Josh Pyke poster, and then they did a line on it, and they were like, "Cool, we're done," and then got on with their night. So every time after that they wanted to go to the toilets and do a line, their new slang was like, "Should we go to the toilets and call it a Josh Pyke?"
Yes, that is a great story. And because you told me that story, and then I told that story to Boy and Bear, and Boy and Bear were like, "Holy shit, that our friends said that too." And it was a thing for like a brief period in London, that the euphemism for going to have a line of coke was to go and have a bit of Josh Pyke.
So good.
A story that I have heard about
It can be a
you.
bad story. It can be like, oh, he's an asshole, but I met you and you're such a lovely.
Well, you are a lovely, generous man. Oh my God, this is going to be hard. Um, Something about Cav. Oh, actually, no, I do remember one thing. So I won't say who told me this, right? But so oh, actually, no, I think, well, this might be true. You tell me. So I heard that before Black Fingernails Red Wine, you guys were more like, indie dudes. And then Black Fingernails Red Wine came out and you had, a curated kind of look with what would you describe, how would you describe the look? It was a bit more like,
Identikit rock star.
and I heard that basically saw the Strokes and you were like, those guys have got a vibe, those guys have got a consistent vibe, and you called a band meeting and you were like, right, from now on we're all going to dress like this. Is that true?
That sounds like something I would do. I don't. I think it was. It's a good question. I don't know when the exact moment was, but I think it was more that we went to the Arias for Songs of the City, and we were up for 8 Aria awards, and we pretty much lost them all to Jet. I think we won a couple, but like for DVD or whatever. And I remember thinking it was okay just to be like the indie kids from Rio, like the dudes next door. And then when I watched Jet walk up on stage, they looked like bona fide rock stars, and their like hair was all out, and they were wearing leather jackets. And we'd gone to the Arias, dressed in suits. We all bought ourselves suits, so we looked like a bunch of boys on our way to the school ball. And so afterwards, I was like, okay, I think I did call a meeting. I said, next record, this is what we're gonna fucking do, and everyone was like, okay, and we all got on board, and it was good because it created an armor, that you could step into and then step out of, which I found very handy, especially when the band blew up and got big, because you're on the street and you're dressed as the dude, and everyone thinks you're the dude, but then if you're not dressed as the dude, people don't really pay much attention.
It's like Clark Kent and Superman.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's why I've always called you Super Cav.
Yes, and yes, no, yes.
You know what I do call you in our house? You're known as Unky Cav.
Yeah, I love that. In my house, I'm like, oh, we're gonna go visit my friend Josh Pyke, and Hunter and Ziggy are always like, who's that? I'm like, you've met him so many times. And like, the guy with the beard. They're like, oh yeah, right. Yeah.
He's cradled you as a baby. He's literally pushed you around in your stroller and changed your nappy. I never changed the nappies, thank God, but yeah.
But no, they know how you are now because they stayed in your house. And
Did you play computer games?
They did, yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Hunter and he got in there pretty fast.
And so you didn't use the studio at all. It sounded like you only realized you had the keys to the studio in the last 2 days.
Yeah, and I didn't trust myself going into the studio because every time I walk into the studio, I'm like, oh, trust. Again, I'm a lifer. If you told me that I could stay at your house for a week and I could just hang out in the studio and write a song, I'd be like, yeah, that would be really selfish to have a family.
Yeah, fair enough. Good,
Anyway,
good man.
On that note, lovely to see your face, old chap, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks when you're actually in Perth. Right,
Awesome.
You're playing at the Leopold in Greenpan without a Frio. So.
Awesome.
And we'll come and hang out.
Sounds great.
All right.
And look, can I just say, you've been a great host on your vodcast, your vidcast.
Yes.
You've got a big future in this town, and good luck to you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the next book club.
All right. Bye-bye.